Welcome back to the deep dive.
So today we are unpacking the pretty extraordinary life and philosophy of Bas Rutten. If you follow MMA at all, you definitely know the name. Former UFC heavyweight champ, famous for that, 22-fight unbeaten streak. Just a powerhouse.
Absolutely, a legend in the physical sense. But what's really interesting about the material you shared is how it moves way beyond just the fighting career.
Yeah.
We're really diving into his whole journey, from this high-profile fighter, bit of a party lifestyle maybe, to someone deeply committed to faith, structure, and mastering his inner self.
Yeah.
So our mission today is kind of looking at how he took that discipline, the rules from martial arts, basically used it as a blueprint for changing his personal life, his spiritual life.
And it's so compelling because, his story doesn't start with strength, does it? It starts with weakness. It's kind of hard to imagine the Bas Rutten being bullied.
Right, but he was severely. He had a terrible asthma too, and apparently called himself the leper when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Just constant physical suffering, feeling out of control.
Wow. And that suffering, that's what created the drive, He saw Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon when he was about 12, and bam, that gave him a direction, something to focus on. But finding the right kind of structure, that took a bit. His first go at martial arts ended pretty quick.
Oh, yeah. But how?
He broke a bully's nose, and his parents, they saw the violence, not the discipline yet, so they pulled him out right away, police report and everything.
Oof. Okay. So he had the fight in him, clearly, but not the framework yet. Which brings us right to his later thinking on structure. He actually said he likes the rules of the Catholic faith.
Why?
Why? Because they help manage his self-described really crazy mind.
Exactly. He doesn't see structure as limiting. For him, it's the only way to get functional freedom. It's like those habits, the rituals, the respect he learned back in full contact karate. He feels if he sticks to those, he can, quote, sail through life. Without him, he's lost. And that structure, whether it's the dojo or church or just daily life, it's essential for achieving his really intense idea of what it means to be a man.
And it is intense. It's got nothing to do with muscles or how much money you make. It's all internal.
It's an incredibly high bar, yeah. But it's the one he holds himself to. He says a real man is someone who's in control. Control of weaknesses, vices, imperfections, and crucially, not a slave to passions, emotions, desires. He ties this straight back to his own past, fighting alcoholism, waking up shaking, needing that drink. That, for him, is the definition of being a slave.
Huh. It's interesting how much self-critique is baked into that. Looking at your own self-deception, the weakness that comes from just indulging. And this is where he brings in those acronyms. They're a bit abrasive, maybe?
Yeah, but
memorable. BAM and PUSI.
Well, BAM is the positive call, right? Be a man, which for him means be self-mastered. But the word he uses for weakness, PUSI, it's short for pusillanimous.
Pusillanimous, yeah, that's a big word. Means lacking courage, basically. Determination. Does he ever, acknowledge that telling people to man up or using a word like that sounds, I don't know, a bit harsh? Maybe outdated?
Oh, he leans into it. He absolutely embraces the confrontational side. He thinks society has kind of brainwashed us, his word, into thinking freedom is just doing whatever you feel like. But for him, that indulgence is cowardice. It's lacking the guts to say, no, you're not free then, you're weak. You're pusillanimous, right? Because you're just a slave to the next craving. So yeah, you need to man up and take charge of yourself.
Okay, that need for inner courage, that ties right into the next big area. Suffering and sin. And his definition of suffering, wow. This is probably the most surprising thing in the material. It's completely backwards from how we usually think of it.
It really is a radical reframing. For Rutten, suffering is saying no to the things that will give you pleasure but steer you away from God. It's the active choice, the painful choice sometimes, to restrain yourself in that moment.
So if that's suffering, then sin is just avoiding it, which makes sense of that quote he uses from Scott Hahn. We sin because we do not want to suffer. We dodge the immediate pain of saying no, and that dodge is the sin.
Exactly. And the examples he gives make it super clear. Let's take the money one. A guy needs, say, $1,100 for something important. He's trying to save up. Then he finds a wallet, and guess what? It's got exactly $1,100 cash inside.
Right. So the suffering there is the pain of having to wait to scrape that money together slowly, keeping the wallet. Instant pleasure. You avoid the suffering of saving. But yeah, that pleasure takes you completely off track morally.
Or the self-medication one. You drag yourself home after a killer 16-hour workday. You're exhausted, stressed. The pain you want to avoid is right now. So you grab the six-pack. Instant pleasure, right? You're avoiding that immediate suffering.
But then comes the hangover. The sources definitely point out that long-term consequence. You wake up at 4 a.m., still tired, maybe feeling worse, for another 16-hour day. You just delayed the pain and probably made it worse ultimately.
And he says, this pattern holds for everything. Gossiping about someone you don't like, quick hit of feeling superior, right? You avoid the suffering of just being humble and keeping quiet. Cheating on your spouse. Obvious, immediate, selfish pleasure. But the guilt, the fallout later. Massive long-term suffering.
So it really just boils down to timing, doesn't it? When you get the pleasure versus when you get the pain. And that timing is what separates vice from virtue for him.
Precisely. Vice is always pleasure first, pain later. He talked about learning to commit burglary as a kid. The first time, terrified. That was the initial pain. But by the fifth time, not scared. It just felt normal. Vice makes the bad thing feel easier, which actually makes you weaker over time.
Whereas virtue, that's pain first, then delight later. Like learning to ice skate, his analogy. You fall down, you get bruised, it's frustrating. That's the suffering up front. But you stick with it, the pain goes away, and you're left with the skill, the mastery. Virtue makes you stronger because you push through the hard part.
And this comes back to being honest with yourself. He really hammers this. The first person you cannot lie to is yourself. He found that every single time he said no to a vice, no matter how small, he felt stronger, like physically felt it build, which makes the next no easier. It's like training for your soul, Same way lifting weights trains your muscles.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's dive into the actual daily things he does to maintain this. The practical tools, because this is where the big ideas meet everyday action.
Right. And the absolute cornerstone, the anchor for all of it is the examination of conscience. Every night. And this isn't just vaguely thinking, I messed up today. It's rigorous. He literally asks himself, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I do better?
And that last part, the really crucial question, what did I not do that I should have done? Why is that omission part so important?
Because that's where the sneaky self-deception hides, right? He gave this example, like walking past someone at the gym thinking, hey, I should compliment them, they're working hard, but then just not doing it. That tiny failure, that lack of reaching out, it would apparently bug him until he faced it in his examination. It's like a micro-lie, a tiny failure of courage. It goes back to that pusillanimous idea, confronting every little lapse.
That is intense focus. Okay, he also talks about combining habits, which makes sense for someone who says they have ADD, right?
Yeah.
Hitting two birds with one stone.
Yeah, very practical. He combines the spiritual and the physical. He does the rosary. It takes him about 15 minutes in English, 19 in Latin, he said, while he's doing his daily stretching routine. So instead of stretching being a chore over here and prayer being a task over there, he bundles them. One mandatory block of self-improvement. Super efficient.
And for specific bad habits, like swearing, use something pretty direct, physical.
Oh, yeah. The rubber band trick. Wears it on his wrist. Every time he caught himself swearing, snap. Sharp snap of the band. Basic negative reinforcement. And apparently it worked fast. He reckoned it cut his swearing by 90% in just a month because the little sting was such an immediate, don't do that. Pavlovian, really.
Simple but effective.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's his quick filter test, this three-part question he asks himself before basically doing or saying anything.
Yeah, it's like his instant check for staying on track. Before acting or speaking, he asks, is this going to make me smarter, mentally stronger, or bring me closer to God? If it doesn't tick at least one of those boxes, he just doesn't do it. It forces every little choice to have some kind of positive purpose.
That's the discipline in action. But then he identifies the biggest enemy behind all this, the reason these tools are even necessary, and that's pride.
And he defines pride really simply. It's believing our ways are better than his ways, thinking we know best, we're the center of the universe. And he saw his own huge struggle with pride in really small, everyday things we all do, probably.
Like getting furious when someone cuts you off in traffic.
Yeah.
I think everyone can relate to that little surge of rage.
Totally. And he realized that anger wasn't just, annoyance, it was pride. How dare they cut me off? Don't they know who I am? That kind of internal monologue, he stresses, look, you have no idea why they did that. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe they just made a mistake, assuming it's a personal attack. That's pride talking.
Same thing with holding a door open.
Yeah.
And the person just walks through without saying thanks. That little flicker of anger.
Yeah, he clocked that in himself too. Why am I angry? Oh, because I wasn't just being kind. I was doing it partly for the expected payment of a thank you. My ego wanted that validation. Realizing that was apparently a big wake-up call about his own pride.
So it's this intense internal battle, but then there were also these, frankly, pretty scary spiritual things happening that really pushed him towards conversion. The physical world just wasn't the whole picture anymore.
Right. The sources talk about him realizing there's way more to this life than we can see. He mentions feeling actual physical attacks at night in his house, seeing a shadow fuss walk past, and this one time, a curtain in his house just flew straight up and stuck flat against the ceiling, like defying gravity. Creepy stuff.
But the story about his daughter, that one's maybe the most striking because it seemed verifiable.
Yeah. His little daughter apparently saw and spoke with two dead boys. They told her their names and ages. And later, Rutten confirmed that two boys matching those exact descriptions, 16 and 17 years old, had actually died in an incident right next door years before his family ever moved in. He hadn't known about it. That kind of thing, the spiritual realm sort of bleeding into the physical, that really propelled him towards getting his spiritual house in order. Radically.
Which led straight to his first confession. And he didn't just wander in. He prepared like it was a title fight. He wrote everything down.
13 pages. In a Word document. 13 pages of sins he could remember. The actual confession took 2 hours and 20 minutes. But he said afterwards the feeling was just breathing free air. Like this massive weight lifted, years of lies he'd told himself gone. He also really recommends sticking with the same priest for confession, for accountability. So you can't just, as he put it, be a pussy and run to an easier confessor who doesn't know your struggles.
So the whole arc, from the sick kid to the dominant fighter, it all seems to lead to this realization that the real fight, the greatest courage, isn't in a cage. It's inside yourself, mastering yourself.
Yeah, if you boil down Rutten's whole philosophy of strength, it really stands on two legs. First, discipline. That comes from the rules, the structure, the daily habits, like that examination of conscience. And second, courage, which he finds through suffering, meaning intentionally saying no to the easy pleasure, the vice, the shortcut.
And to wrap that whole continuous effort up, he goes back to his martial arts roots, doesn't he? With that one word that sums up the constant striving. Osu.
Osu. Yeah, it's perfect for his philosophy. It comes from two Japanese words. Oi, which means to push, and shobu, meaning to endure.
Yeah.
So osu is that constant need to push yourself and endure the discomfort, endure the pain of growth, always striving for something better.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty provocative thought based on everything we've just discussed about sacrifice. Think about the incredible suffering people willingly endure for things that are, well, temporary. Athletes training nonstop, executives sacrificing family for status, musicians dedicating lifetimes to mastering an instrument. These are goals Rutten himself says often don't fulfill in the end, and they certainly don't last forever.
So the question becomes, if we're willing to go through that much pain and sacrifice for temporary things, what deeper, maybe smaller, more immediate sacrifices should we be making right now? What quick pleasures should we be saying no to enduring that tiny bit of suffering for the sake of things we believe are eternal? What are you actually suffering for today? A momentary buzz, a bigger bank account, or maybe control of your own soul? Something to think about.